Hello Divination and welcome. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a custom footer using Divi's theme builder. This is the final result we're aiming to achieve, so without wasting a lot of time, let's dive in and let's get started. Alright, so right now I'm in my admin dashboard. So the first thing we need to do is to head over here to the theme builder. So this is going to be our starting point. So I'm going to click here on theme builder. And what we need to create here is a global footer, and we're going to build this from scratch. So I'm going to come over here and click on add global footer. Now we are going to build this from scratch. So I'm going to click on build global footer. Next, I'm going to come over here, click on build from scratch. And before we start creating, I need to add a background color to our section. So I'm going to come over here, click on this gear icon, click on background, and then add my background color by clicking on this plus button and adding black as my main color. Next, we need to also add some margins to our footer. So I'm going to come over here to design, spacing. So I'm going to add 6 VW to the top and the bottom. So I'm going to add it here. Now, a quick tip, if you want to add the value on the top and the bottom, you can just activate this chain and this applies the same value both to the top and the bottom. Next, I'm going to add a left margin, and again, it's going to be 6 VW and also the right margin. Now it's time to add the padding, and this time it's just going to be my left and right padding. So I'm just going to add it over here, and this is going to be 30 pixels. Now we need to add also some borders here as a design. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to make it rounded both on the top left and the top right. So in order for us to do that, I need to disable this chain, because if I add my values in here, they will be added to all the sides. So I'm going to break this chain, add 20 pixels here and 20 pixels to the right. So as you can see here in my design, I have these rounded corners just on the top. Right, so the next stage is adding a box shadow to our design. So I'm going to come over here, click on box shadow, and the design I'm going to go with is this one right here. And now it's time to add our adjustments. So I'm going to start here with my blur strength. So I'm going to come over here, click on this gear icon, and I'm going to paste my value between the brackets. And if you want to use the exact same values as I'm using throughout this tutorial, I will leave a link to the post in the show notes below. So with all this done, I'm going to save, and now it's time to add our row. So I'm going to click on this plus button and we're going to add a single row. And then in this column, we're going to add a text module. So I'm going to select it. And we're going to add some text in here. So you can add whatever text you want here. So I'm just going to type in excited to get started. Now I'm going to make this text heading 2. So I'm going to highlight, click on this drop down and set this to heading 2. Now we need to set our text settings for heading 2. So let's head over here to the design tab. And the first thing we're going to do here is to go to heading text. Make sure you choose heading 2. And then over here now, we're going to change the font to Poppins. So I'm going to search for it. And by the way, you can use any type of font you want here, and there's quite a lot to choose from. And all these are Google fonts, which are free to use. So now that I have my font, I'm going to come over here to my font weight, set this to semi-bold. And then I'm also going to align this centered and then make our text white, because it was quite difficult to read on this dark background. Now let's add our text size. So I'm going to set this to 31 pixels. And I might as well go in and set my sizes for the tablet and the phone. So I'm going to click on this little icon here, click on the tablet tab, and we're going to set the size here to 24. And then on the phone, we're going to set this to 18. So this just ensures that your design is going to look great on all devices. Next, we're going to add a line height. So right now it's at 1 EM. So we're going to set it to 1.6. Now let's head over to sizing. So I'm going to come over here and set my maximum width to 700 and then save. Next, we're going to add a button module. So I'm going to click here on this plus button, add my button here. And on the button text, I'm just going to name this button request a quote. Now we need this button to be aligned. So I'm going to come over here to design alignment. I'm going to center it. All right, so now it's time to stylize our button. So I'm going to come over here to design button, activate use custom styles for button. And now we have access to make changes to this button. So the first thing we're going to do is to change our title text here to 12 pixels. And our button background color needs to be set to black. And now our text color needs to be white. So this ensures that it's much easier to read. All right, so now that we have those set up, the next stage now is to go to our button border radius. So we're going to come over here. So currently it's at 3 pixels. So we're going to set this to 100. And we're going to come over here to the letter spacing, set this to 1 because the text is a bit too close. So it's much easier to read when you add letter spacing. Right, so the next stage now is to just make sure our text is all uppercase. And we're also going to set this to semi-bold. Now, you know the font we used here earlier on is Optin, so it's a good idea that we also use the same font here just to keep everything consistent. So I'm going to come over here to button font and change this to Optin. Now it's time to go to setting, give this button some breathing space. So I'm going to come over here, and the first thing we're going to do is to add top and bottom padding, and this is going to be 14 pixels. So now you can see as soon as I've done that, now we've added some padding, and already it's making our button look much better. So next we're going to add left and right padding. So my left padding here is going to be 40 pixels and my right padding is going to be 58. All right, so now that we've added our spacing, the next stage is to add an icon to our button here. So I'm going to click on button. And let's head over here to our icons. So you can choose any icon you want, but the one that I'm going to go with here is this right here. Okay, so on the icon color, you can choose whatever color you want as well, but I'm going to go with white. And then, and this is very important, where it says only show icon on hover for button, normally it's always at yes, which means only when you mouse over it is when you see this icon. So we don't want that. We want our icon to show all the time. So I'm just going to activate that. And now you can see that our icon really shows even if I don't hover over it. All right. So the next step is to add another section. So I'm going to come over here, click this plus button, click on regular. Now, before I add any columns, I'm going to come over here to my section settings and add a background color. And this color here is going to be white. So I'm just going to paste it in here. Next, I'm going to come over here to design, spacing, and we're going to add a top padding of 0 pixels both to the top and the bottom, and we're also going to add some rounded corners. So let's head over here to our border, break the chain, and we're going to add 20 pixels here to the top left and 20 to the top right. Next, we're going to come over here to our box shadows, and we're going to go with this style, and the first thing we're going to change here is the blur strength. Set this to 135. And I also need to add my shadow color by clicking here on this eyedropper tool and just pasting my values between the brackets. Now, as I mentioned before, if you want to use the exact same colors as I'm using throughout this tutorial, I will leave a link to the post in the show notes below. All right, so I'm going to save this now and let's add our single column. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. Now let's go head over to our row settings because we need to make some changes here. So I'm going to click on the design tab, sizing, activate custom gutter width, and we're going to bring this all the way here to down to 1, and we're also going to say equalize column heights. Now this design here needs to be edge to edge, so let's set it to 100% on the width and 100% to maximum width. Next, we're going to come over here to spacing, and we're also going to add a padding of 0 both to the top and the bottom. So I'm going to activate my chain, and now we're going to go to column spacing. So I'm going to save this. In fact, I need to go into this column here. So I'm going to click on this gear icon. So this allows me to go into that single column. So now I can make changes to that column. So I'm going to click here on design, and we're going to start with our top padding. So let's click here on spacing, and our top padding here is going to be 100 to the top and 100 to the bottom. Now we might as well add our sizes for our mobile devices because it's always great to make sure that everything looks great on desktops and also on tablets and mobile devices. So I'm going to click here on this little icon, click on tablet. Now here it's going to be 50, both on the top and the bottom, and that's going to be the same as well for the smartphone. Right, so back over here on the desktop, we're also going to add left and right padding of 50 pixels. So I'm going to activate the chain here so that the value is applied both to the left and the right. Now it's time to add a text module. So I'm going to save this one more time, click on this plus button and search for my text module and select it. So in here, the text I'm going to add is just going to be called customers. And let's head over here to the design and stylize this text. So I'm going to come over here, change my font here to Optin. And we're also going to make this bold so it really stands out and it's easier to read. And our color here, just to continue with our branding, we're going to set this to black. And for our text size, we're going to set this to 17. And we're also going to make sure that this is centered. So make sure on text alignment, it's set to centered. And we're also going to go to spacing and add a top and bottom margin. So the top margin here is going to be 10 pixels and the bottom is going to be 30. So this just ensures that we have enough space above and below the button, the text. So I'm going to save this. Next, we're going to add a divider module. So I'm just going to scroll down here and here it is. I'm going to select it. So first things first, make sure show divider is set to yes. Then I'm going to come over here to the design tab, click on line. And the first thing is set this to black. Next, we're going to come over here to sizing. Now that line, as you can see, it's way too long. So we need to reduce the width by coming over here and setting this at 15% and centering it. So pretty much that's all we need to do here to the divider. I'm going to save. And we're also going to add another text module here. So I'm going to scroll down, select it. And in this text module, I'm just going to add products as my main link. Now, it's important here that we are consistent with the fonts and also our colors. So before I do any of that, I'm going to come over here to the link. And this is where you need to add the links to your pages that you're adding over here. So for this example, I'm going to add a blank link. Now let's head over here and customize this text. So I'm going to click here on text. And the first thing we're going to do is to make sure we choose Poppins. And our font weight here is going to be light. And our text color, this time, we need to distinguish this from the titles. So we're going to make this text gray. So I'm going to click here and paste my color in here. Now my size here is at 14 pixels, so you can either leave it there or you can just bump it up a little bit, make it 15 pixels. And for the text alignment, we also need to make sure that this is centered. Now let's add a top and bottom margin. Now again, as I mentioned before, this just ensures that we have enough space above and below this link. All right, so to do that, we're going to come over here to spacing, margin. We're going to add 10, and this is both to the top and the bottom. So once we've done that, pretty much we have all the design elements that we need on this link. So I'm going to save it. Now, the next stage is to just duplicate this a few times. Now, you just need to duplicate this as many times as you want to have your links. So I've just gone ahead and done that. Now, what you need to do is to go into each and every one of these. So I'll just do one as an example. So I'm going to click here on module settings. So let's say this is your services link. So you can just name it services and then come over here to the link. And then you want to make sure you set the proper link where it links to the services page. And do that to the rest of the links here. So now that I've updated all my links, the next stage is to duplicate the entire column. So to do that, you want to come over here to our row settings. And this is the column that we need to duplicate. So you want to do this maybe about 3 times. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, what you can also do here, if you want to be a bit fancy, you can always come to column 2 here and go to the background and add a background color like that. So that just, makes it look a bit different. So the next thing you want to do is to make sure you go in and rename these columns and also update all your pages. And to do that, all you have to do is to come over here. Let's say you want to set this to About Us, and maybe this one here could be further information. Right, so as you can see, these are very easy to update. And then you also want to come over here and just change these links to whatever pages that you want to link to. All right, so I'm going to save this for now. And what I also need to do is to add one more column here. So I'm going to click on this plus button. So the very first thing I need to do is to add a color to that column. So I'm going to come over here to background, click on this plus button and paste my color in here. Right, so in these column settings, I need to go to design, spacing, and add a top and bottom padding of 70 pixels. I also need to add a left and right padding. So this just ensures that we have some breathing space when we start adding all our content in here. Right, so now that I've added that, I'm going to save and we're going to go back over here. So let's start by adding our first module. So I'm going to click on this plus button, and the module that we're going to add is a social media follow. So I'm going to select it, add all my links in here. So I'm going to go in and just change this from Twitter to something else. So let's go with, let's say, Dribble. I'm going to go back, change this one here. So let's say this one here is going to be Instagram. So you can add as many as you like here. In fact, you know what? Let's add one more. And this one here is going to be YouTube. So I'm going to click here on this gear icon, change this to YouTube. Great. So now that we've done that, the next stage now is to just go in and reset these colors. So I'm going to click on this I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to choose reset styles. Now you want to make sure you go ahead and do this to all of them. And as you can see, as I'm resetting these, the colors, the background colors is actually disappearing. And this is exactly what we want. So now that I have all these, I'm going to come over here to design icon, and we're going to set our color. So as you can see here, they're quite difficult to read because of this light background. So I'm just going to drag this all the way down to black. And we also need to align this correctly. So come over here to alignment and make sure it's all centered. So the next thing we're going to do is to add an email opt-in. So I'm going to click on this plus button and search for my email opt-in module and select it. Right, so the very first thing is get rid of the title, get rid of all this text, and we also want to get rid of this background. So click here on background, and where it says use background color, let's say no to that. Now we also need to stylize this and make it just look similar to the colors that we're using here for the footer. So I'm going to come over here to design, and we are going to go to our fields background color. So we're going to reset this because we want this set to transparent. Now our field text color needs to be black, so I'm going to drag this all the way down here to black. And then we also need to make sure we're using the right fonts. I'm going to change this from default to Poppins. Now for the font size, we're going to set this to 13. Now as you can see here, we don't have any borders for our forms, so we need to set this up by coming all the way down here to field border styles. So make sure you're on this first tab, and the width here is just going to be 1 pixel. Now, there's also something that I haven't mentioned, and this is very, very important. You want to come over here to content and make sure you connect your email opt-in by coming over here to email account. So as you can see, there's quite a lot here to choose from. So once you've chosen your autoresponder, just make sure that you choose also the list. And this is what's going to make your form work. So once you've selected your list and your email provider, just click on add, and this is where you need to add your name and API key, submit, and then that means it's all connected. Now if I preview this without actually going in and adding this information, the form will not show. And also if you come here to fields, in fact let me cancel this, if you come here to fields, you can also disable the last name. And now you just have the first name and email. So that's maybe the way you would prefer to have your form. But for now, I'm just going to make sure that the last name is still on there. So as you can see here, this button here needs some styling. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come over here to design, button, use custom styles for button. So let's start with our button text color. So we're going to set this to black, and the size here is going to be 12 pixels. And our button background color is going to be white. And we need to get rid of our border width. So I'm going to just drag this until I get to 0. And then for our border radius, we're going to set this to 100. And for letter spacing, we're going to set this to 1. Now, when it comes to the font, we also need to make sure we're consistent here. So let's go to Poppins as our main font. So for the font weight, we're going to set this to semi-bold, all uppercase. And we're also going to choose an icon to go with this. So I'm going to scroll all the way down here. And the icon I'm going to go with is this one right here. And I want to also make sure that my icon shows even when I'm not hovering over it. So I'm going to disable this. And now you can see our icon is showing. Now, just by looking at this button, you can see that this button is way too thin. So it needs some padding. So let's go ahead and do that. So over here, I'm going to add 15 pixels to my padding, both to the top and the bottom. So now my button is nice and big. Right, so we also have that text here, the copyright text. Now let me show you a really cool way to add it. So what we want to do now is to just save this, and we also need to add a text module. I'm going to search for it, select. Now here we're going to add some dynamic text. So I'm going to click here on this little icon, and what we need here is the current date. So here where it says before, this is where we're going to add this text here, and on after, we need to add the all rights reserved. So I'm going to paste it here, and the date format. So as you can see here, it says October 24th, 2019. So what we can do is we can add a custom date here, and I'm just going to add 20Y, and this just shows just the year 2019. So the text here also needs to be consistent. So let's go ahead and work on that. So I'm going to come over here on design, text, set this to pop-ins. The color here is going to be black and the size is going to be 16 pixels. And over here on spacing, we are going to add a top margin of 50 pixels. This is so that the button is not, the text is not way too close to the button. So pretty much this is how our footer works. I'm going to save this and we can do a quick preview now. So I'm going to save this one more time and close this. Save all changes. And now if I go to any of my pages, if I go all the way down, this is now our footer and everything looks really, really nice. But just remember, you need to come over here and make sure you add all your links and the links, and the page titles, and make sure they link into the right pages. And because this is global, this is going to be applied to all your pages on your website. So there you have it. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and do follow us on our social media platforms. By doing so, you'll be notified every time we release new tutorials. Until next time, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.